Typically speaking, Nintendo does very well in the portable marketplace, and in fact, they have dominated this space since the 80s with the launch of the original Game Boy. But they have made one very notable misstep in this space, the Game Boy Micro. Though I'm a big fan, I understand why it failed. Let's take a look. Now, before we get started with this, one thing I want to get out of the way. I understand some people, when I said one notable misstep in the space, meaning portable gaming, some will instantly say, well, Izzy, this is not really their biggest failure when it comes to portable gaming. What about the Virtual Boy? Well, you know what? The Virtual Boy wasn't a portable. I'm sorry. Hell, the Virtual Boy wasn't even a Game Boy. It was really an experiment by Gunpei Yokoi, and one that failed horribly. So, while it tanked, rightly so, it didn't really bring the Game Boy name down with it. I mean, not that the Game Boy Micro did, but a Game Boy failure I think is more significant than a Virtual Boy failure. Anyway, let's get to the console. The Game Boy Micro was released in September of 2005 and it cost $100. That alone made it an uphill battle for this guy because it's $20 more than a GBA SP, which had more features than the Game Boy Micro, but we're gonna get to that later. Which, by the way, for a long time, I actually called this thing the GBA Micro, but it doesn't have the advanced name in it. It's just Game Boy Micro. Anyway, it cost $20 more than the GBA SP despite having fewer features, and not only that, but it was also competing, in a way, against the DS, which was already out at this time, and it was $50 more expensive, but it ran DS games. And the DS Lite was only 6 months away at this point. The DS Lite, which by the way was only $30 more expensive than the Micro, which made it even harder to compete against. Now the concept is really cool. So around this time, iPods were really popular, and with them the idea of this little personal entertainment device, which is not only something that you kill some time with, but it's also a bit of a fashion statement. Because of that, the Game Boy Micro had removable faceplates. You could swap yours out for something that you feel more like in that particular day. Now, I dare not remove mine because this is the Famicom version. It's a little bit rare, meaning more expensive, and I'm terrified of breaking the little clasps that hold this thing in place, so I'm just gonna leave it like that. Besides, I don't have any cover plates to show you, so why risk it? Like the iPod, the Game Boy Micro was designed to be very small, especially when you consider the phones of the time. This was pre-smartphones, so phones were still those flip phones that were very small. They were about this size, really, when they're closed. So that's really the space Nintendo was trying to go for. Something iPod-like, this small little piece of electronic that you kill time with, and it goes into your pocket easily. You can swap the faceplates to show a little bit of flair, too. In case you never held one, I think this would be a good comparison. This is my old iPhone 5, which I still have for some reason, and this is the Game Boy Micro. As you can see, it's actually smaller. I mean, obviously not in width, but it's smaller in size in most dimensions than an iPhone 5, which by 2018 standards is tiny. So this thing is very pocketable. For somebody who loves portability, like it's my case, it's great. Now let's talk about what's not so great about the Game Boy Micro, and the first thing is, it's not backwards compatible with Game Boy games. You cannot even actually put it in, like it'll sort of fit, but it doesn't connect to anything. That alone made it a hard sell against the GBA SP. Again, backwards compatible and $20 cheaper. On top of that, the connection port on the Game Boy Micro was different from that of other GBA models, which means you couldn't play multiplayer games with your friends unless you had an adapter, which back then really no one had. There's also the issue with the screen. Though excellent, it's a little too small and cramped for games that require a lot of reading, like say RPGs, again making it hard to compete against the GBA SP. I feel like this size perhaps was its undoing. If it was a little bit larger, I think that they would be able to accommodate some things like backwards compatibility and a bigger screen, making it more comfortable for extended play sessions. But really, I think the biggest competition against the Game Boy Micro was Nintendo's own DS Lite, which came out, like I said, 6 months after. It reinvigorated public attention on the DS line. It was only $30 more expensive. It had 2 screens. It played DS games on top of GBA games, and yeah, I'll give you that. I was never a big fan of this, but for only $30 more, instead of picking up this guy, you can get yourself a DS Lite, which was what I did at the time. Now, a funny story, this is not my first Game Boy Micro. I got my first Game Boy Micro in a trade with a guy that I used to work with. I traded an old Palm Pilot for his black Game Boy Micro with Pokemon Fire Red, the one that I played the most. And the weird thing, it's hard for me to accept that I did this, because in 2007, if I remember correctly, that's when I moved out of my parents' house. And I was in a really minimalist headspace at the time, and I figured, you know, I have a modded PSP. If I ever want to play the GBA library, I can just emulate emulated on that thing. And with that thought, I actually threw my Game Boy Micro in the garbage. Literally pick it up with the charger, with the games I had, threw it in a garbage bag, and threw it in a dumpster. Like I said, it's hard for me to actually accept that I did this. And not only the Game Boy Micro, I actually threw away my purple Game Boy Color. Same thought, I can just emulate on my PSP, don't need this. I could have at least sold the thing. It's relatively rare, it goes for at least $100 in most auction sites. There was no reason for me to throw it in the garbage. I don't know what I was thinking. Trying to rectify my mistake, I ended up picking this guy up a few years down the road, but it still pisses me off because really I should have 2 Game Boy Micros and not just one. Maybe I should just get another. And I can never fix this because if I get another one, now I have 2, well really I should have 3. It's a mistake that can never be fixed. That's the Game Boy Micro. I like the idea Nintendo was going for. They're trying, this was supposed to be their answer to the iPod, and I get it. It's a nice device to own if you're a collector. This is a must-have because it is a little harder to come by, so it is pretty sought after. You want one of these in your collection if you happen to collect Game Boys like myself. But I can definitely see why it failed. No backwards compatibility, a little too expensive for what it was, perhaps too small for most hands, and it was competing with the juggernaut that was the DS. Again, the difference between these two is $30. So you almost have to be crazy to get this guy instead of this. All of that being said, I do really like the Game Boy Micro. I'm happy that it exists, and I actually play on it from time to time. It's not my favorite platform to play GBA games in, but it's a nice little oddity, and it fits in the breast pocket, so it's so easy to carry this around. Anyways, that's the Game Boy Micro. What were your thoughts about this console? Did you have it? Did you love it? Did you throw one out like me? I don't think anybody else is crazy enough to have done that, I hope. But if you want to make me feel bad about my own stupidity, say in the comments that you did. And that's all my time for today. I'll see you guys next time. Typically speaking, Nintendo does very well in the portable markets. Fuck! Tô errando essa merda direto, caralho!